All right, let's jump right into the shadows of a seriously grim, highly theatrical, and deeply profound philosophical fable, The Weavers of the True Sky. Today, we're putting on our Nietzschean lenses to dissect how societies actually construct entirely artificial realities just to hide from the raw terror of existence. Buckle up, it's gonna be a dark ride.
Okay, let's dive into this foundational lore. Right off the bat, we need a group known as the Pale Gatherers. And here's the kicker. They didn't pull off some grand, heroic victory over nature. Not at all. Instead, their big solution to the sheer, overwhelming force of existence was basically just a collective agreement of pure avoidance. They nurtured this deep, ancient weariness and decided the absolute best way to handle the intense power of the real world was to simply agree, together, never to look up again.
So, what was driving this? Well, the source text describes these pale gatherers as having this soft, unshielded fear. Imagine looking up at the blazing sun or down at the raw baking earth, and instead of seeing life or vitality, you just see sheer terror. The actual world terrified them because of its completely indifferent, unearned insistence on just existing. It just was. And for a people already so bone-tired, that unrelenting, uncaring reality was literally too much to bear.
Now, this fear taps into a massive core concept here: ontological violence. Listen, they weren't afraid of getting a sunburn. They were terrified of what that sun represented. Ontological violence is this unbearable reality of a world that just exists, without apologizing to you and without offering any sort of comforting grammar to soothe your suffering. It's the absolute, unforgivable proof that reality just doesn't care about human pain.
And the gatherers didn't just feel this. They built a really methodical, specific logic around their despair. It goes like this. First, they looked around and realized that in the natural world, growth inherently requires struggle. Second, struggle inevitably means you're going to experience pain. So step 3, that pain became undeniable proof to them that the actual world was designed by something totally indifferent to their existence. They took natural growth and linked it directly to a visceral, unbearable pain that they absolutely had to escape.
So, what exactly did they do about it? Well, over the course of an entire generation, thread by thread, they literally wove a massive veil of silk across the sky. They built themselves a bloodless ceiling. And here is the brilliant, twisted part of this fable. When they finally finished it, they didn't call it a veil. They didn't call it a shield. They looked up at this fabric and called it the true sky. They designed it specifically as a grammatical shield to block out the stinging, harsh light of the physical world. This brings up a fascinating point about how this text redefines the whole concept of the metaphysical. Usually when we think of metaphysics, we think of this grand spiritual rising above the physical world, right? But here, it's defined as a fleeing beyond. This silk sky is a literal architecture of denial. It is just a textile curtain hung right at the exact border where reality becomes way too painful to name directly. It's not an ascension at all. It's a total escape route.
Now, for a lie to survive, it has to forget it's even a lie. And what's really interesting here is the profound linguistic shift that happens beneath this new ceiling. The creators of this true sky went in and quietly scrubbed the inherent pain right out of their own language. Originally, the word growth meant the overcoming of resistance, but under the silk sky, it was rewritten to mean just the absence of visible struggle. What was once known as visceral real pain got completely rebranded as the peace of the soul. They literally changed their vocabulary to hide from reality.
So how do you destroy the real world without actually throwing a punch at it? Simple. You outrank it. Step 1, you invent a truer version of the sky. Step 2, you devalue the actual physical world by placing your brand new invention above it. And step 3, you successfully reclassify reality itself as just a mere shadow, a crude, temporary sketch of that finer, perfect truth hanging in silk right above your head. As the source material points out, this is the primary technology behind every anti-natural morality out there.
But let's be real about what this architecture of denial actually is. This true sky was never, ever a true sanctuary. It was a shell. And shells are only ever built around one thing: the soft, unshielded fear of the creature hiding inside them. This was a completely hollow construct born out of a profound existential dread, built by a people absolutely desperate to hide from the heavy demands of existing.
So, imagine the scene. Beneath this massive silk ceiling, the actual, vibrant world begins to suffocate. The raw, hot earth is entirely blocked out. The once thriving orchard is cast into this gloomy, artificial twilight.
It's a really vivid, suffocating picture, and it sets us up perfectly for the massive ideological clash sitting right at the core of this text. That suffocating twilight brings us face to face with a stark philosophical contrast. On the left side, we've got the Wagnerian redemption narrative. This is the culture of the draped orchard, bleeding out the strong, castrating natural instinct, and throwing a parade for pale twilight. And over on the right, the Nietzschean sovereign free spirit. This is the lone gardener, fueled by the hunger of deep roots, actively affirming the blazing, actual sun. We are looking at two radically different ways of assigning value to life. Let's look closer at this Wagnerian law of the orchard. Under this rule, a totally anti-natural morality takes the wheel. The sap of the strongest plants is literally bled out just to nourish the barren ones. It enforces a massive cultural castration of natural instinct. They prioritize wilting, diseased plants and rebrand all that decay and exhaustion as morality or salvation. Meanwhile, true self-growth, actually having deep, strong roots, is labeled as selfish. They end up literally worshiping the rust that eats their own anchors. They mistake a total inability to thrive for some kind of spiritual grace. But you know how this goes. Eventually, the resources run dry. The decay just goes way too far. And so, we really have to ask ourselves, what happens when this artificial sanctuary, this beautiful true sky, stops being a safe haven and just becomes a suffocating graveyard of ideals? What happens when the lie simply can't hold its own weight anymore? Well, that is exactly when the lone gardener arrives. This figure represents the Nietzschean philosopher. And let me tell you, he does not show up with a gentle little watering can. He arrives carrying a blade of absolute surgical necessity. He hasn't come to just smash existence to pieces, far from it. He's come to decisively, precisely, hack away the deadwood from this suffocated orchard. The text uses this incredible imagery, describing the philosopher not just as a gardener, but as a metallurgist. He wields his hammer almost like a tuning fork of philological precision. Picture him walking through the orchard, tapping the bronze skin of all their established moral idols. With a single diagnostic strike, he listens. He's listening to hear whether that idol rings true with the density of lived authentic power, or if it just echoes with a completely hollow linguistic void. This fierce diagnostic strike is the inaugural act of what's called a transvaluation of all values. The philosopher's goal here is to separate the heavy, leaden weight of decadence from pure, golden vitality. He's exposing exactly where the word virtue has just become a convenient mask for the castration of natural instinct. His ultimate goal? To return this orchard to a forgotten natural age, a time where a branch is judged as holy simply because it's strong enough to bear the weight of its own abundance. And so, armed with that surgical necessity and an absolute demand for the truth, the fragile textile lie is ripped to shreds. The philosopher splits the silk veil wide open. It's a stunning climax. This act instantly ends the artificial winter of decay, exposing the orchard once again to the sun's ancient affirmative eye. Finally, the living are allowed to actually thrive under the reality of the open sky. Now, the core tragedy of this entire architecture of denial becomes painfully clear. By fleeing the ontological violence of the sun, by hiding from the struggle and the real pain of existence, those pale gatherers hid from the only actual warmth in the entire universe. That true sky protected them from having to admit a really hard truth. The very thing that demanded their struggle was also the only real source of life they would ever be offered. Which leaves us here. When the silk veil is ripped away, and that comfortable artificial twilight is totally gone, do you possess the deep roots required to thrive beneath the violent, unfiltered glare of reality, entirely without a silk sky? It's a heavy question. Thank you for joining me for this deep dive into such an incredible fable. I really hope it leaves you thinking deeply about the skies you choose to live under.